All right. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of our Saturday show. We're doing it at 9 p.m. Eastern, which seems to really help the volume of participants. So we'll try to do that as much as we can. Anyway, we always start with our prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. All right. Well, we have Larry Becraft, attorney from Alabama, with us again, and Mark Lucas, somewhere in a back cave in Southern California. And so I wasn't with the show for show 119. This is show 120. And so we got an eager group of hosts here who want to share some information with you. And we've got quite a crowd. Looks like over 20 people live. So Mark, you want to start off, or Larry?
Yeah, sure. I already talked to Larry, and we thought it would be a good idea if I were to lay out the points that we want to touch upon before the show, and then we'll let Larry decide which one he wants to attack first. So we left off last episode with 4 cases that you showed on the screen. Then we have Nelda contacted us. She wanted to be let in to speak, just like we let Lisa speak last time. And then we also had a conversation on our No Mass Tax chat with Bill that expressed some concerns regarding the AIA ability to block suing the employers. So these are the 3 main issues, and a little trivial thing that Larry just sent an email from somebody that we can, if we have time, we'll address that at the end. It was a little funny. Some Bennett guy out of Georgia saying that the Supreme Court just rendered the income tax null and void. But that's only if we have time at the end of the day. Larry, which one of these appeals to you? Which one would you like to start with?
You mean about the national case, the case dealing with the CTRs?
Well, we talked about that last time, and we offered cases, and Joe has those if you want him to display them, where they were successful in
Well,
filing
I would like to
lawsuits.
kind of put a context to it. It might take about 10 minutes to give the legal background.
Go right ahead.
And I think this is real important for people to, the people that are interested in the tax issue, you can benefit by knowing something about related programs being administered by the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department and the IRS are the parties that are involved in the enforcement of the income tax. And when you take a look at how they do other laws, to me, there's a comparison between, other laws and the income tax laws. And one of the laws that I would like to direct our attention to tonight, and also probably discuss at least, not in a minute or two, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to present our attendees with this, are the currency transaction laws. Because I think that, the currency transaction laws, if you're interested in it, I think that there is something to be learned. Those that are interested in the tax issue would benefit by taking a look at some different laws. But there's principles that you can see a lot easier in these other laws that then can provide a legal framework or a context in which you can view the income tax laws. What I'd like to direct your attention to are the currency transaction laws. And the currency transaction laws go all the way back to World War I. And Congress came along and passed an act dealing with currency, basically the first currency transaction laws. And this was involving trading with the enemy. And trading with the enemy, if you properly look at it, if you really dig into it, like I've dug into it, I think that there's a limit to the application of the currency transaction laws under the Trading with the Enemy Act, and it excludes the transactions of domestic Americans. But the Treasury and the way the IRS wants to, enforce these and write regulations for those laws, they want to avoid making that bold statement. But nonetheless, the currency transaction laws really need to be studied by at least coming up with a comprehension of the Trading with the Enemy Act's laws that were adopted in 1917. Now, let's move forward a little bit in time into 1970. In 1970, Congress was concerned about overseas transactions. They were concerned about crooks. Members of Congress was also concerned with other politicians, and they were opening these foreign bank accounts. And, foreign bank accounts were the source of graft and corruption. You open up a foreign bank account and have somebody that wants to bribe you just stick some money in your foreign Swiss bank account. And, Swiss bank accounts are hard to locate. Find out whether or not somebody's being bribed by depositing money into a foreign bank account, like a Swiss bank account. But nonetheless, in 1970, Congress comes along and passes the first of the currency transaction laws. And one of the things, if you sit down and take a look at it, the area of application, where this law was to be applied was very gray. But nonetheless, there was after the CTR laws were passed, there was a California Bankers Association, thought that these CTR laws, when I say CTR laws, basically what I'm talking about is everything that's related to making these reports of cash transaction of $10,000 or more. And those are the currency transaction reports. So, once Congress came along and adopted this law, which the Supreme Court said in the case that dealt with the constitutionality of this law, the Supreme Court said, hey, look, these CTR laws are written so that the law itself is not self-implementing. It requires the Treasury Department to come along and adopt regulations to enforce this law. So, this very first case that justified the constitutionality of the CTR laws, it was upheld, but it's what's happened since that time that gives you a very good understanding about what I contend is the jurisdiction of the Treasury Department. Now, over time, Congress has come along and talked about a gray area of application under the CTR laws. And over time, Congress has come along and passed some laws that are a little bit, well, I'd say a lot clearer about where these laws are to apply. But one of the, if you're interested in digging into this, all of the laws administered by the Treasury Department are in Title 31 of the United States Code. And if you go over to, they used to be in the parts 103, the early part of Title, the early sections of Title 31. Now they're over at, there's basically 3 volumes of the Title 31 statutes at large, and the 3 volumes of regulations. But the CTR laws found in Title 31, which are only implemented by means of regulations. You have to go over to Title 31 of the Code of Federal Regulations to find out how they're applied. But I would direct your attention to, if you go over to Analyze under Title 31 of the United States Code, the area of application of the CTR laws, I would just, for those that want to dig into this, maybe you want to dig into it and tell us what you learn next week. But, there is a distinction in the laws themselves between a citizen, a resident, and a person. So if you want to see, something where A lot of laws are written to apply to a God notice Mr. Person. But here in these CTR laws, oops, it looks like a citizen is one thing different from a citizen and a person are two different things. They are distinct, they are different. So if you want to see that, take a look at the beginning sections in Title 31, United States Code, look up the CTR laws, and take a look at these sections dealing with where the CTR laws apply. And if you want to see a distinction between citizen, resident, person, you can see it there. And then I would say, gee, why is that the case? Is there a distinction between a citizen and a person? Could that be more broadly applied than just under the CTR laws? But I would think that it would be beneficial for, if you're really trying to learn something about the income tax laws, knowing something about the jurisdiction of the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department has jurisdiction over the IRS. But digging back into the boss of the IRS, taking a look at what the boss of the IRS does, and take a look at do a little bit of study in the CTR laws, you might find out there are some principles that you can find under the CTR laws that are equally applicable to the Internal Revenue Service. So, I'm just would like to encourage people to take a look at the CTR laws. Now, one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is, to deal with litigation. And of late, besides a part of the Treasury Department dealing with the currency transaction reports. A currency transaction report is, a cash transaction involving the deposit or withdrawal from a bank or another financial institution of cash more than $10,000. That's what we're talking about. Now, of late, what the Treasury Department has attempted to do, pursuant to some laws that have been enacted here in the last couple of years that are related to, or they're at least falling into the category as CTR laws, they're dealing with other subjects. And those other subjects are Treasury is trying to require reports of transactions involving the sale of real property. Now, Treasury thinks that it needs, for control purposes, that's what it really wants. It wants to keep track of, all of the commercial transactions involving real property. And so here you have a law that Congress passed in the last couple of years. Now the Treasury Department is implementing it, and they're wanting, they have come up with these forms, reports, to require the reporting of transactions involving the sale of real property. Now, that what's different from a report of money you make to be reported on a Form 1040? And what is constitutionally, isn't it indistinguishable? That Treasury's coming along and saying, well, not only are we requiring a report of what you made, we're requiring reports of transactions involving real property. And so, there have been some legal attacks upon that requirement. And of late, there have been a number of favorable decisions. Now, let me give an example of one. I live in Huntsville, Alabama. Here within the last, 4 or 5 years, ever since the Trump administration came into power, we had a vacancy in the Northern District of Alabama of a federal judge. And so there's a little town south of Huntsville, across the Tennessee River, south of us, a little place called Arab, Alabama. And, I guess Arab probably has about maybe 10,000 people, 15,000 people, small country town. Well, our most recent federal judge was from there. His dad was a lawyer. He's a lawyer. He recently got promoted a U.S. District Court judge here in the Northern District of Alabama. And of late, he came out with one of the first decisions holding this requirement imposed by the Treasury Department by means of its regulations that, these reports involving transactions in real property. So if real property is sold, land, and there's a deed executed to transfer that land, Treasury wants a report. And so it wants to build a dossier, an inventory of all of the owners of real property in America. That's where it's headed. But, this U.S. District Court judge, and, he was one of the first to say, well, this is unconstitutional. And, there have been 3 other decisions since that time. Now, if you would like to, I can email it to people, those 3 cases, or just one of them if you want. But if you would like those decisions, we can. The people that are sponsoring this program could send you those cases. And, I think it's real important for people that are interested in these issues, for something like this, where you have a string of recent federal judges coming along and say, hey, look, Treasury's overstepped its authority. It's acting unconstitutional. It's requiring these reports of the sale of real property. So if Blackacre, a farm, is being sold from John Doe to Jill Smith, Treasury says, well, gee, you're supposed to file this report. And some federal judges have said, well, that's unconstitutional. And so I think that there are some principles to be learned if people that are interested in these issues would just at least read these cases. So, Mark, does that sound reasonable that we could provide any of our attendees who want these cases to be provided with them?
Absolutely, and the members of NOMAS chat already have been provided with the cases, but it looks like we have about 31 participants right now, or 30 participants, and if they're interested, I'm sure Joe can make them available as well. The 4 cases. So this was the first 10 minutes. Larry, are you happy with this, or you want to continue on the same line, or should
Well,
we move
no,
over to
I
the
think
next
that's enough. I
one?
think we can move on to something else. But I
Okay,
would like to, just before we started this program, I sent it to you, and you mentioned it at the start of this program.
right,
The stuff that comes up in the freedom movement.
right,
And he was just
right.
letting me know, that this fake story is being passed around. But this, there are people that will, wow, this, oh man, the 16th Amendment had been ratified. And, wow, that's all we need to know. We don't need to participate in anything else. We just need to know the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified,
Well, I'm going
which
to
I
read
think I
this
know a little
because
something about.
yeah, it's a good segue into Claire's letter right after this. So
Yeah.
it says the Supreme Court just sealed a ruling that abolishes income tax. Money they took from you for 113 years was used to suppress every cure that could have saved your family, all capitals. Not reformed, not reduced, abolished. Case number 24-1791.
That's a fake number.
Well, filed under seal, of course. Decided 7-2. No dissent published. No media briefing. No public docket entry. And it goes on and on. So now, Larry, how
So in
should the
essence,
average
Mark,
listener
what
know?
this fake story is saying that somehow, some way, under this case number 24-1253 or something like that, which doesn't exist,
Right.
in this case that's unpublished, there's nothing, you can't pull up anything. The Supreme Court has determined in a 92-page decision that the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified. Now, I think I know a little something about this argument about the ratification of the 16th Amendment, because when Bill Benson finished his work, I was the first lawyer to raise this issue in court. And I litigated it a whole lot for about 5 years. And, I know exactly what, having litigated this issue, I know exactly what the courts have done. And so you have, instead of dealing with the real issues, we have, I think that these people that are talking about and spreading these fake arguments, I think they work for the IRS. And people need to be aware of the fact that there's just a lot of crackpots that are
Right,
trying to destroy what we're trying to accomplish.
right. Okay, so did you want to go over Claire's letter right now, or do you want to let Nelda in?
Well, let's let
Uh,
Nelda, we're almost halfway through our devoted hour.
well, it's going to be a longer session
Yeah,
tonight,
okay,
right?
good.
Okay, so do you want to unmute Nelda, Joe?
Hi, guys.
Yes. Go right
Hi.
ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Nelda.
Okay, great. Mark, I'm not exactly sure where you want me to begin.
Oh, well, wherever you want to begin, but the part that I thought would be very interesting for this group in particular is from your communication that you just received some follow-up letters from the IRS, regardless of the fact that you filed the due process back in October, November, or something like that, that you used from Dave Champion, and you were open to explaining that to the group, your experience, and share with us here.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I've received, back in October, I received what the IRS claimed to be the third CP something or another number. Failure to file my 1040 for the year 2023. So I was retired in 2023. The only income I'm receiving is from Social Security Administration, and also from I want to say a rental agreement with an energy company. So it's that rental agreement that gave me like $40,000 that year that I think is kicking this thing off, because I'm only getting $28,000 for the year from Social Security. But yes, so I contacted Dave about it, and I did purchase his due process package, and it does a really good job of explaining, all of the TDs and all of the TDs, the Treasury decisions. I'm sorry, all of the Treasury decisions, and how all the Treasury decisions only impose the income tax on non-resident aliens and non-resident or non-U.S. or U.S. sourced income that's going outside of the U.S. Okay, and the package included a 10-page memorandum of law, as well as an introductory page, and then an affidavit. And I felt the affidavit was really important also because in the affidavit is where I got an opportunity to claim and claim under oath, basically, that I filed the I filled out and filed the W-9, which triggered the 1099, and I filled that out without knowledge that I didn't have to. And that does not create a perjury situation, nor does it create a liability situation, because I don't have to pay the tax, and therefore, I filled it out in error. So that just because I filled it out in error doesn't mean that I'm now liable. So anyway, I sent that off in October, and I got a response from the IRS saying, "We received your letter, thank you." And then they said, "But for whatever reason, I don't know why, they decided to send it off, then to forward it to the credit." Am I saying that right? The credit processing center. So apparently, I don't know if my letter got swapped, and I mean, if they bypassed, and I don't know if I accidentally waited too long to send it. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I thought I was good to go since it's now been 5-6 months since I received a letter from the IRS. Until last week when I received another letter from the IRS, and again they're sending. I guess it's the next step in their computerized process, the CP 2566. And this one now, actually, the two 1099s that I did receive in 2023, and again, it's requesting that I file the 1040 form. So I can't say that Dave's process actually failed. I think I think it's just if there was a mix-up in the timing, but my intent at this point is to just resend exactly what I sent before. Only just send it to this new address and see what happens after that. So I don't know if anyone has any questions on that or what else we want to get into. If you want to get into the details, I have the documents.
I would leave it to Larry if he wants to address this, or if he wants to open the floor for questions, or where he wants to redirect from here.
Hey, I think it'd be important for Nell to just keep on explaining how she got into it, what she's trying to address, and what she thinks about the results.
Before you do that, Nelda, am I understanding correctly that actually Dave advises at least 6-8 months before the so-called letter that you use from him reaches the higher echelons, and that they will eventually leave you alone, but meanwhile you might still receive harassing letters like the one you just received?
I can't say that for sure, Mark, because I don't remember everything on our phone call, and I was not able to record our phone call. He thought that it's not that he doesn't allow us to record the phone call. It's that I didn't have the technology to record our phone call, unfortunately. So because I wish I would have, because I was trying to desperately take notes, but he's paid by the hour, so I wasn't. But he did lead me to believe that at some point this letter would stop the process, because a lot of their process is automated by computers, and that when they receive this document, especially since it's a 10-page memorandum of law, I think he's using a little bit of strategy there, that if you flood them with too much information, that they'll put you aside. But yes, he gives you the impression that you will eventually be entered into their computer system to be left alone. And but apparently I haven't gotten to that point yet. So like I said, my intent at this point, unless I get some other advice, is to just resend the exact same thing I sent before. So but like I said,
is that for the same year, or does he advise?
It's all for the same year, 2023.
So what would happen next year?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
What would happen next year? I mean, if let's say you receive letters, when next year filing time comes, what do? You send the same process letter, or you have to wait for them, or what's the deal?
Well, there's a couple of things. So I'm not sure if the IRS considers this an audit, but I would expect that they can't be asking for that kind of information consecutive years, but I'm not sure about that. That's just my own. But anyway, no, what Dave is saying is that once you get put into this file of do not notify, it's a do not notify file, then they don't, for consecutive years, then they don't notify you if you don't file.
What happens between you and right? They did answer my question. Thank you. What happens between you and the so-called employer at that point? Who informs them that they should stop withholding?
I have to inform them, and that's my big question. How in the world do I inform the Social Security Administration to stop sending 1099s? I mean, that's like to me that seems like a hopeless case. And then I don't have an employer, but I have this rental agreement where I'm in fact the tenant. I'm sorry, I'm the landlord, and this large corporation is renting the property from me. So this doesn't make any sense to me. Why is a tenant able to file a 1099 on a landlord? Does that's what really boggles my mind here is, and I think this boils down to some of the uh it kind of falls along the same lines of what Larry's talking about with the currency transaction reports, but I mean, I think it's kind of the same process. Here is someone who's renting property from me, and because it's a large corporation, is able to file, because I'm the landlord, is able to file a 1099. That, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. Does that make sense?
Well, I think you need to, I think it'd be clearer if we dealt with these statutes that deal with the 1099s. You know, under the Internal Revenue Code, this requirement dealing with forms and returns starts with Section 6001 of the code. That's the beginning of the three sections deal with filing income tax returns. Well, there are a lot of other returns, and a 1099 is one of those other returns. And it's all under Section 6041, which is after Section 6001. Section 6041 of the Internal Revenue Code deals with these reports that you're talking about.
Right.
But when you read the section, you find out it's dependent upon regulations. So, this requirement to report transactions of $600 or more is based upon the regulations that, for Section 6041 of the code. And, one of the things that you need to understand is, uh, the income tax law is it's kind of like peeling an onion. You peel off one layer and then you got another layer and then there's another layer below that. Well, under these third-party reports, third-party returns, which start off at Section 6041, and Section 6041 deals with $600 or more, that's dependent upon regulations. And, we'll raise this very simple question. The regulations are the ones that really have the meat for the requirement for 1099s, reporting $600 or more. And when you take a look at the regulations, how this requirement was built. This requirement comes from a huge regulation, which covered provisions of a whole bunch of third-party reports. This part of the Section 6041 of the regulations dealing with, hey, there it is on the screen, 1.6041-1. This requirement for section for $600 or more. Let's see, Treasury Decision 8734 is a source. I'm trying to see it here in the sources. Well, this is an older set of regulations that don't mention the fact that, the regulation I'm talking about. But under Section 6041, this requirement to report $600 or more comes from another regulation that was published in the Federal Register. It is a long regulation, but it covered a whole bunch. Yes, Treasury Decision 8734. And when you take a look at that Treasury decision, it only applies to non-resident and foreign corporations. And this requirement to report $600 or more is imposed from this Treasury regulation, which doesn't have a blooming thing to do with anything other than non-resident and foreign corporations. So that's important. Does that Anybody want to ask any questions about that?
Right, and that's exactly what Dave's letter says is that those, and I put in the chat all the ones that he listed that have to do with that section you mentioned: 6041, 6041A, 6042, 6044, 6045, 6049, like a whole list of them. And that's exactly what he says then, is that these have nothing to do with these only have to only impose the tax on non-resident aliens. So,
But when you take a long Treasury decision like this that covers nothing but, deals with nothing but non-resident aliens and foreign corporations, but then it covers a whole bunch of other provides meat for a lot of regulations. But when you just take that one regulation out of this and stick it over into the Code of Federal Regulations, people miss the fact, because they're only dealing with one part of this Treasury decision. They don't understand that it was only related to non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. So if you turn to the published regulations under this section, you won't understand that this part dealing with this part dealing with reporting $600 or more. It comes from another regulation that's limited to non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. That's part of that's part of the trick that people need to understand. That's my comments, Nelda. Go ahead.
okay. Where am I? Yes. Yeah, and I think it was Treasury Decision 8734 that it referred, or that what do I want to say, that where all of those 60, 40, 6,000 ones were derived from. So yeah, I understand that. It's how do we, it just seems backwards that, do you know of any other renter who is able to, I mean, renters pay a lot of money each year, are they filing a 1099?
Well, you're not experiencing anything abnormal.
Well,
You have a lot of these people that are brainwashed that are making payments of $600 or more than anybody else. They're filing
right.
1099s. Their accountants tell them to do it. Just because you're dealing with a large corporation that has in-house lawyers and in-house accountants, they believe that they've got to file a 1099 for everybody that they paid $600 or more to. That's the
Right.
reason why you're getting a 1099.
And that's a good point. They have lawyers and accountants. So Dave's package does include a letter that I'm supposed to send to these people, including the Social Security Administration, that suggests to them that I'm not liable for this tax and that therefore they need to stop sending the 1099s. Whether or not that'll actually be successful is a different story, but for 2020, for the year of 2023, I'm beyond that point. So I should be sending those in for future years. And that answers your question, Mark. Then for future years, once I get the 1099s extinguished, then I should be okay. But I think that's kind of a hopeless situation. So what Dave says then is that all we can do is build our court record by continuing to send them the letter to stop doing this and stop triggering the 1099. So I still have that part of the process to go through, but I just wanted to take care of a 2023 situation first. So
Understood, but you have two issues here. One is a
Yes.
1099 and the other one is Social Security. And I don't know that the Social Security would be under the same provisions as a 1099 from a private party. Larry, any comments?
Well, I haven't looked into the requirement. I think that I think the Social Security Administration is probably, not that I know, not that I've inquired. I would think that the Social Security Administration is just simply following, Treasury regulations, just like the company that's sending 1099s regarding Nelda.
correct.
Social Security
Correct.
Administration does the same blooming thing. They're just following what they think is the accurate regulations.
Correct. They're sending a 1099. That's all that
Yeah.
they're doing. So it's the exact same thing. So it's just that, they're a whole lot bigger than an employer or something like that is, and so it's and am I able to go up against this Goliath? And all I can do is try. So
The reason I raise that issue is because Social Security seems to be some kind of a federal nexus, whereas your tenant has no federal nexus, and that may be a hurdle down the line, and that might be something we need to study and look into in more detail.
I understand. According to Dave, it's not. It's just because it's a federal government, and it is benefits that I've paid into the system. I know. A lot of people say that, well, the Social Security money that you paid in is not set aside. Well, it's legislated as being set aside, but just because they misappropriate it doesn't mean that I shouldn't get my benefits. So it's just one of those things where it's the administration of it that I have to argue that they should not be sending me a 1099 because I'm not a non-resident alien. So
Good. Anything else you want to add, Larry, or do we want to move over to Claire's letter?
I have nothing that we need to address, unless you or Joe.
I'll keep you all posted as it goes. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing, Nelda.
This
All
is
right. Thanks,
Claire,
Mark.
and I don't really know about what the letter is, but I just have a comment about the $600. That's from the original income tax during the Civil War. And I've seen, if you bring that up to today's figure, I've seen anywhere between 20,000 and 80,000 would be the threshold, not $600. So I'm just saying, in today's figures, the 600 would be worth many, many more times that.
Are you
You're adjusting
saying
for
that,
inflation.
are you saying that the filing requirement of the Civil War Income Tax Act was, the minimum requirement for filing was 600? I think it was 650 or something like that. But
Yeah,
is
it
that what you're
was.
referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, the
It-
filing requirement is different from, what we're dealing with here in reference to third-party reports. I don't see that there's a direct connection between the filing requirement amount under the Civil War Acts and, the thing that compares to the filing requirement under the Civil War Acts is Section 6012 of the current code, which deals with the requirement of filing returns. So, I don't draw a direct connection between, these amounts you find in the Civil War Income Tax Acts and this requirement here. I think they're not related.
Well, is there any
Go ahead.
justification for where they came up with that figure then? I don't know.
I don't see any connection other than that's just a figure that they took. They wanted a certain amount. They didn't want to have people filing reports regarding minute transactions. But when the $600 came about, $600 was worth a whole lot more than it is now.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
inflation comes along and makes what was $600 20 years ago was a decent amount. Now that we're being subjected to inflation, we're just being pushed into more and more $600 transactions are happening. And
Well,
they're
yeah, that's
more
why
and
I
more.
think that number should move with the inflationary figure.
Well, yeah. That's going to require congressional action. But for what we're concerned with, I think that the American people that are interested in the tax issue need to be concentrating on what are the issues we need to pursue to really put the income tax into its proper perspective. Who does it affect? Does it affect Americans? Does it not affect Americans? Are they at home? Are they abroad? Those are the issues I think we're concerned with.
Oh, Remember the segue to Claire's letter? She doesn't know which one I'm talking about. I'm talking about your letter that you sent about the conversation with the AI. Here, you want to run this, run us through this, the
Well,
points you think are most important?
yeah, with AI, the only thing that AI really knows is what it can find on the internet. And of course, the things that it can find on the internet are not necessarily true. And as far as income tax goes, it's not true at all. And so the arguments, I just thought the arguments that the AI came up with were very revealing because that points us in the direction of the things that we need to attack.
Right. So this is a
And
7-page letter. Can you point the parts that you find most relevant?
well, it kept arguing with me that it did apply to Americans, but it never showed definitively how that was true. It was just, well, it does. And and one of them that I had that I didn't send you, it said, well, there's no there's no law, there's no actual liability that you can find, but it just takes this and that and the other pieces and puts them together and creates the liability, and that's what we are running into with jurors and everybody else, the people that we work for in our jobs. And I mean, my mother was even in this. She goes, well, if you weren't doing anything wrong, you wouldn't have been arrested in the first place. And that's how the judges and the attorneys look at it. And so I just thought it was pretty revealing that the AI was pointing out things that show us what we need to combat, because that's when people go on the internet to ask about the IRS, these are the things that they're going to find.
I agree.
They're not right. So it's up to us to figure out a way to try to correct it.
Right. And this is basically why and what we're doing here, because if we keep going to their solutions and their replies, they're going to be circular. And this is all they've given us, circular replies. And before too long, the scary part is we're going to have AI litigation, where these are going to become entirely administrative and most likely without any possibility of appealing.
Absolutely,
And
because it'll be a robot.
right, right.
Good
Right.
point.
So you had some, if Joe, would you mind scrolling down? There were some red highlights there. And I don't know if you wanted to comment about those. Are those red highlights yours?
No, they were from your synopsis.
Oh, I see.
I'm
Okay.
just trying to put the whole thing together so that people can see what they say and what the truth is. And what create a bottom line of what's what. But I think people need to see what the other side is saying so they can know that they're being misdirected.
Right, right. Well, I made this available on No Mas Tax Chat, so everybody has access to it. And
Well, I look forward to the comments. It's, what people find on the internet, that's what we need to combat. And, like I wrote to Elon and I wrote to Mike Adams and I said, your AI is way off base. It's garbage in, garbage out, and you're fomenting a crime on the American people by doing this because it's a fraud. And I was really taken aback when I went several months later to Mike Adams' site and I found some more favorable, at least the AI was considering other things.
Hey,
So,
Claire, I think our attendees are kind of being brought into something that they need a background on. They don't know what you're exactly talking about. You went over to some AI machines and asked some questions. Can you give a background about that?
well, I'm trying to zero in on American liability, and I really want to find some congressional uh, verbiage that says we understand the American people aren't included in this. I haven't found it yet. I had some good quotes from Phil Hart's Constitutional Income. Do you have any? But I'm just trying to compile some information so that I can show people what the consensus is and what the law really says, so they can see how they're being misled.
So you went where were these AI programs? Where
Well,
were they?
this one in particular was Mike Adams. His is brightanswers.ai. And the other one that I frequent is grok.com, but I think Bright Answers seems to have a lot better information for some reason.
And so you asked these two programs, these two AI programs that are made available, are they for free on the internet?
Yes,
Is
they
Mike
both
Adams
are.
doing that?
Yeah. Mike
Okay,
Adams
so,
spent
so
over $1
you went
million
over and
on
asked some
research.
questions about the tax issue, and these are the answers you got.
Right. And when originally I got the answer from Bright Answers, it was, yeah, of course, everybody owes an income tax, period. That's it. End of story. And after I wrote to Mike and I told him his AI was completely wrong and committing a crime in this, a few months later, I went back and I was surprised that it had more, not, I can't say AI had thoughtful answers, but they were answers that were more in Americans' favor and more of considering what the law really says. And I was really surprised about that. And I don't know if Mike went back and uh, reiterated that, or if the AI just learned to search more stuff on its own and came up with these answers. I don't know how that stuff works, but people are depending on AI, and I think that's one way that we need to. Maybe we should start our own AI to show them what's what, when people research, because this is where people are going to get their news and their info and what they believe about things in life. And if it's not true, then, it's a problem.
Well, are you believing what AI says?
No,
I
um,
don't either.
no, I take it with a grain of salt. I take the things that I know are true. But the thing is, Larry, if you don't know history and you see AI, you don't know that it's true or not when you read it. You think it's true. But see, we know that what AI says is not true because we've been studying it. But we're the last bastion of this. Everybody else has died out. And our group
It's
is,
very easy. I know to
we
split the
got gray
handle.
hair already. you know, so this is a thing that we need to figure out a way to
Stay in
get
there
ahead of.
and fix it when you flush instead of just walking away like it's not your problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
sorry for the
this is
thought.
AI is the future,
Okay.
and it's where people are going to go for their info. And so we need to really influence AI with the truth while we still have an opportunity to do it.
I think a court case won in matters of withholding would probably be the solution, don't you?
I do.
Well, I had people send 1099s about me that never withheld as an independent contractor, so-called. When we were just operating on our own, we were doing just fine and raking it in, and all of a sudden they said, if you don't become an employee of our country, of our company, we'll kick you out. And so, Jamie said, oh, okay, signed up as an employee. And about 3 days later, he got all the liens and levies and all the stuff and lost his job and his whole career. And they took everything we had and blah, blah, blah. So, they coerced him to kowtow, and then it, completely worked against us.
Larry, I know you're looking at the time, but we still have the
I'll stay
Anti-Injunction
on however
Act.
long we're going to be.
Okay, well, do you want to address the anti-injunction? So Bill and I had a conversation on the No Mass Tax chat. He is rather
you having a conversation with?
Bill, a gentleman, a member on the No Mas Tax chat,
Okay.
and we were talking about suing the employer and on the basis of withholding and all that, and he said, well, you're not going to be able to get to the employer because of the Anti-Injunction Act.
Well, that's what the employer's going to say. But then
Well,
the issue becomes, is there a tax? When we're making the argument, there is no tax. So in order to see whether the anti-injunction applies, they've got to address the very argument we're raising. There isn't a tax. And if there isn't a tax, anti-injunction doesn't apply. So before you can get into anything about the Anti-Injunction Act, you got to address our issue. Does that make sense?
It does, and I hope that he might be on the call tonight, so that way he can speak for himself. I hate speaking for other people. He was invited.
Well,
but
the
I guess he didn't-
Anti-Injunction Act is something that Congress passed in the Civil War. And, it says, you can't, before that time, you could file a lawsuit just to go into federal court and raise a tax issue. Well, I don't know this. And so Congress passed the Anti-Injunction Act to say those kind of lawsuits can't be filed. The only way you can raise the issue of, something regarding a federal tax, you got to pay it first and then sue for a refund. That's the anti-injunction. You can't enjoin the collection or the operation of a tax. But if there isn't any tax that applies in that situation, it doesn't apply because there's no tax. And so I think it's real important to show that, an American citizen, there's a real question that needs to be litigated. And there's a very strong argument that withholding doesn't apply to an American citizen. And what you have under the current Internal Revenue Code is there's withholding under Subtitle A. But the only withholding there is under Subtitle A, it starts in Section 1441 of the Internal Revenue Code. It applies only to non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. Oh, so there's no tax due under Subtitle A. Oh, so we're dealing with Subtitle C, the employment taxes starting at 3401. Well, I think it's real important for, one of the things that I've tried to get people to look at for 20 years, look at the tax laws, and you can see how it applies. And so we've got a very legitimate argument that an American citizen living and working at home isn't subject to withholding taxes.
This is
I'm ignoring a party that's calling me.
this is where some people go a little bit deeper, and they use this argument, and they say, well, the non-resident, actually, if you look at the definition of United States, the non-resident alien is non-resident to the federal jurisdiction, therefore is on a par with a foreigner. And those people are enticed or have been attracted to filing forms 1040 NR.
Okay, Mark, can you expand it a little bit more? Because I'm thinking of at least several different, they're related, but they're different arguments. Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about 7701 arguments?
I'm talking about people filing 1040 NRs on the basis of them not being, not having any income from the federal jurisdiction or from the federal zone or anything that has a nexus with the federal government. And therefore they consider themselves non-residents relative to the United States, according to the definition of United States as being Washington, D.C. 7701, yes, 7701 definitions, yes. Yeah. And you have a presentation about the state and the United States, and I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight, or should we move on?
Well, are you asking me?
Yes.
Well, I see a problem with that because, when you take a look at 7701, for the benefit of our attendees that are unfamiliar with this, this is an argument based upon the section of the Internal Revenue Code that deals with the definitions of terms. And that section of the Internal Revenue Code is section 7701. And some people are turning to, well, 7701 paren 9 and 10, which deals with, this issue of state in the United States. And so there are arguments made, that the United States, pursuant to the Internal Revenue Code, is just Washington, D.C. Is that what you're talking about?
Basically, yes.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a real problem. Here I can see how a problem is created, because if you take a look at the actual, if you get on the internet and pull up Title 26 of the United States Code, and there could be multiple volumes as a PDF, but at least you can see how it looks in print. And so if you take Section 7701 in the print, to me, there's two different versions of the Internal Revenue Code that you can get off the internet. There's one that's just an HTML file, just HTML. And, you can't see it in a page structure. But, I work in, I like to look at, in reference to law, actually pull up, a title of some code, either a state code or the federal code. And I like to actually look at the code. And so when you do that, there's 7701C, which deals with includes and including, the definition of includes and includings. And I think that when you take a look at Section 7701C, paren C, which deals with the definition of includes and includings, and then insert those words which appear in 7701 9 and 10, which provides the definition of state in the United States, you can't ignore, the later definitions in the definitions of the word includes and including. Does that make sense? Is that kind of a, we probably need
No, I know what you're
Okay.
talking about, but
Yeah.
probably needs a clarification, because most people use, for example, Dave Champion uses the includes and including argument in relationship to the definition of employee. And that is one of the pivots that he uses to justify how the employee is mainly, for the purposes of the income taxation, subtitle A, is mainly a federal worker or a government worker.
well, under subtitle A, if
I'm
that's
sorry,
what
sorry,
Dave- I
sorry,
disagree with
subtitle
what
C.
Dave,
No, I
what you're
misspoke.
saying is what Dave says.
I misspoke.
disagree with it, because
Misspoke.
Section 1461, which deals with the only withholding under subtitle A of the Internal Revenue Code, which is the main provisions of the income tax, it's only limited to non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. Although non-resident aliens and foreign corporations can be government employees.
I misspoke.
They are.
Yeah, I misspoke. I meant subtitle C. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Now that I think that there's a real need, if you sit down and take a look at the whole shebang, the whole shooting match, you can see how withholding works.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a real need for the American people to get it solved in their favor, understand withholding, and then say we are right, and needs to be litigated.
Right. And the confusion is because people create a mental bridge between subtitle C and subtitle A. The bridge is they have the mental connection between subtitle C and subtitle A due to the employee definition. And that seems to, the ultimate analysis, be the only bridge that could be created is if that employee were a foreigner.
Well, there's withholding under subtitle A, and there's withholding under subtitle C. We're clearly not subject to withholding under subtitle A because we're not non-resident in foreign corporations, and we're not living abroad. So that makes subtitle C, which starts with section, the 3000 series, 3401. That's what we are concerned with in reference to the application of it to the average American, at-home American working here in the United States is concerned with. Or is that too much to say?
If we speak the truth, there's never too much to say, and I'm sure
Okay.
people appreciate that. But any questions?
I think the employee and employer thing is a term of art, like individual is. When you look at the code, you go, well, I'm an individual, but in Title 26, individual is not you. It's the non-resident alien person. And I think the employee and employer in the code applies to federal workers and the government that's employing them. I don't think it's what we think of in our private sector employer. It's just different. It's just a term of art that's used just in Title 26. And I think that's where the confusion lies, is that they use the same words that we do, but they don't mean the same things.
We agree.
Well, how about if we ask some of our attendees if they want to ask some questions, Joe?
Yeah, I think anyone can unmute who'd like to ask a question, but keep in mind that more than one person may start talking, so be tender as you attempt to speak. Well, any takers?
We have to
Hi.
unmute. Did we unmute everybody?
There's somebody's talking.
This is me, Renata.
Renata, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to. I was a bit confused. Mark was asking about the 1040 an hour, which is one approach that at least I have been taught until recently, and I'm still not clear to me if that's actually valid. If it still can be done, or this is something that could backfire later on.
Well, could I ask who's promoting it? What all the substance of the argument? What are they saying?
It's about was it Section 873? It was around the lines that Mark was saying. If the income is not connected, is not federally connected, the argument is that it doesn't have to be reported. So
let me explain.
Yeah, go
Explain that a little bit for Larry. So the argument is around Section 873B3, wherein for purposes of deduction, the non-resident alien is identified as a national of the United States.
Well, that national argument got invented maybe 10 or 15 years ago. It was invented by a guy that used to be he used to live in Atlanta. And I knew him. And I remember when he came up with the idea and he called me up, he's real enthused. And, I've got it solved. But, it wasn't solved. There's a lot more to it. What is being taught by whoever's promoting this? What exactly are they saying?
873B3. Joe, can you pull up 873B3? And that way we get to look at it, and it would be very useful. You'll see exactly where the confusion comes from, where the argument comes from.
Well, starting at 861 of the Internal Revenue Code, I call that, decades ago, I promoted this in the movement. I educated people about the source rules, with their sources within and without the United States. And those are the source rules that start at Section 861 of the Internal Revenue Code. And so these, when you're dealing with 871, you're dealing with something that's inherently non-residents to begin with. Yeah, in the case of non-resident aliens. So, but what's the point that they want to make?
Well, so here's the point. So if you scroll down, Joe, scroll a little bit down, see it right there. Go a little more, until you see 3. There you go. So B says exceptions. It says personal exceptions. Number 3 is personal exemptions, and it says the deduction for personal exemption allowed under Section 151, except that only one exemption shall be allowed under 151 unless taxpayer is a resident of a continuous country or is a national of the United States. And because this national of the United States is identified under B3, under 873, if you could scroll up, 873 deals with all the way up, deductions. Okay, and this pertains to non-resident aliens in the case of a non-resident alien individual.
Well,
So
but this gets back, Marcus gets back around to, what is a national?
Correct.
And
that's why we wanted to
I saw
discuss.
that decades ago. People were talking about what a national is, and they just look around and kind of find where national is in some of these statutes, and then draw conclusions. And in reference to federal law, just trying to concoct the meaning of something in that way quite often is erroneous. And, there's a history behind how the word national got developed. National did not appear, national wasn't used in any way, shape, manner, or form before 1900. National wasn't used before 1920. It's only about after 1920 does the word national, in reference to referring to a human being, come about. And there's a history behind it. And unless you want to go into it, I'll just draw a conclusion. A national is not a citizen of the United States. A national was a term for, by the late 1800s, 1890, we were getting ready to conquer Alaska, to conquer Hawaii. A lot of countries had these foreign jurisdictions that they controlled. And the United States did. We had Puerto Rico, Alaska, Hawaii. These were referred in by the international community. They developed a term. Since these people were not citizens, a term was used to define them, to name them, and that was called national. And insofar as we are concerned, if you really dig into the meaning of the word national, here in America, what it referred to was the citizens of the insular possessions that we controlled. Guam, American Samoa, all those countries like that, all those places like that. And, so without digging into the meaning of it, people just drew a conclusion that is wrong. And there's a lot of that in the tax movement. And so we could say a lot more about what national is, but I've got it addressed over on my website, and it's under my discussion of what a lady I call Fake Judge Anna. She's been a big promoter of it.
What about using the argument of, codes 872, that the gross income is not is not derived from sources within the United States, nor gross income connected to the conduct of a trade or business within the United States, in order to exclude the income from the 1040 and on, because that's one of the avenues that, for instance, David William, with some people in this group might know.
Well, that wouldn't fly because it's talking about the same national, isn't it?
Because you fall under the same group of, you will be directly connected to 873. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is this is about national, and national is perceived as a non-resident alien, then it falls in the same category to whom income taxation applies to. Non-resident aliens or foreign corporations, doesn't it? Whether it's a trade or business, whether it's an employee working for a state or federal government.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, let me just make sure I understand. The 872, it's only applying to nationals. Is that what you mean?
Of these codes, a national is not a citizen, an American citizen,
Right.
is somebody in territories. And that's the argument that we're just processing right now with relation to 873B3, because that's where the argument comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Larry was saying, that he heard this argument back years ago and he followed it. And that's why he has on his site an explanation about where national comes from and how would be correctly addressed for purposes of the Internal Revenue Code.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not
I don't need
national.
Right.
And the taxation of the citizens, of the people that live in the instant possessions, is something entirely different. It's separate apart from the United States Constitution. You know, the citizens of the instant possessions are not under the Constitution. You know, back in the late 1800s, several cases went to the United States Supreme Court to deal with, you know, to address the issue of, gee, where do, you know, we had a bunch of instant possessions under our control then. Guam, American Samoa, you know, Puerto Rico, you know, and the question became, well, gee, does the Constitution even apply in those areas? And so, in essence, to make a long story short, Congress is the absolute authority in the instant possessions. And it's not, the instant possessions are not under the United States Constitution. Congress governs them just as a government. You know, the instant possessions are not under the Constitution. They're not a state. They're not within the Constitution. And Congress just controls the instant possessions because it's the boss. It is the government. And so it can do whatever it wants in the instant possessions. And so those people are referred, and all this was basically developed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. That's when this term came about at the international level. A national is a citizen of these areas that a lot of governments over the world, we had England, France, they had these possessions, and the United States had possessions. And it's the people that are born and bred and live in these instant possessions, which under federal law, they're referred to as nationals. And, you can still, Bill, I don't know, Mark, I don't know whether we should take what's on my website and email it, or do you think? But I've got it over on my website.
Sure, but in the end, Joe will, he can point out directly where it's at, but he does that at the end of the show, usually, with your site. And if you want, you can pinpoint where the national argument is. Did that answer your question?
Kind of. I feel like I need to process it because there's so much new things.
It will be, this whole meeting will be posted on the OMAS Tax chat as soon as I receive it. I try to get to it within a day or two. And then you get to listen to the whole thing again over and over in your spare time. And if you have questions, you can place them in the OMAS Tax chat, or even DM me, and we can go over. I try to do as much as I can whenever I have time to help people out.
You're great at answering everyone's questions, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're
Mark,
welcome.
I have a comment on this. It's not your status that makes you liable for the tax. It's how you earn your money. You can be a national and not earn any money and not have a liability for a tax. If you earn your money and the federal government helps you earn your money, they get a kickback. And I think Tommy Cryer points that out very well in his memorandum when he said he won his case proving that the federal government had nothing to do with his law practice in Louisiana.
I agree with everything you're saying, with one specificity question. Are you talking about subtitle A or subtitle C?
Either one. I don't think any of the income tax applies to people in the 50 states earning money.
So when you say it's not about your status, if you are a non-resident alien, is that not a status according to either one?
It is, but if you don't earn any money, you're not liable for a tax. It's the way that you earn your money, and the money that you earn is the measurement of the tax. If there's no money and there's no federal connection, there's no tax.
Completely agree with everything you said.
So could I ask a question?
Should.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so my wife and I are just kind of new at all this stuff, and I'm just trying to figure out our way here. But as I listen to this, I mean, I guess we've watched some of the videos, and it made it sound like, well, all you got to do is just not file your 1040, and you're then from this point forward you're okay. But it sounds to me like you got problems with every single one of these ways of getting money, like Social Security, whether you have a pension, whether you're trying to convert money from a regular IRA to Roth. I guess we're just confused. Is there going to be a lot of hoops we got to jump through once we start this, or is it just a matter of not filing?
If somebody is reporting to the federal government that you made income and they give them an amount, and you don't file a 1040 to match it, then that's what starts the whole problem. The problem is the reporting. If they don't report, there's no problem.
Yeah, and that's
Third-party reports, like we're talking about, 1099s, W-2s. It is these third-party reports required by filed by people who pay you money, like an employer, like a bank. These information reports are fed into the IRS computer. And so the computer builds up a dossier of who all paid you money during any given year. And so since these third-party reports are going to the IRS, if the IRS doesn't match a sufficient amount of these third-party reports with the return, then you could be exposed to investigation by the IRS. That's the way it comes about. So are you Steve?
Yes.
The guy okay, Steve, what you ought to do is, you say you're kind of new to this. I think it's real important for people to, number one, try to find a trustworthy source of tax information. And, I think if you're really concerned about this, you need to have a commitment to, hey, look, we're being subjected to a giant scam, and the government shouldn't be doing this, and we need to get it reserved in get this issue decided in our favor. So I think that's what you need to kind of have, that kind of attitude. But then, when you start digging into this, you also need to find, a trustworthy source of information. And we're trying to bring good, solid information to people. Now, I've got a lot of these listed over on my website. There have been just a whole bunch of scam artists that have passed through the tax movement. And just tonight before the start of this program, and Mark, I think it would be beneficial for people to, read the email that was sent to me right before the start of this program. And it relates to the 16th Amendment. And I think I know a little something about the 16th Amendment, because when Bill Benson finished his investigation, going to each state in the union that was in the union in 1913 to check out how the 16th Amendment was ratified, the 16th Amendment being the income tax amendment, we came to the conclusion, we've got an argument here that the 16th Amendment wasn't ratified. And so here, in reference to that issue that was litigated, I litigated it decades ago, where the courts dodged the issue and they say, this is a political question that the courts can't decide. So just here tonight, I don't know the date it was sent out, might have been within the last week, but we've got a scam artist sending out a fake argument. And that's one of the things that that really makes me mad about this movement, because there's fake information that floats around. And to me, this fake information comes from people that are our enemies.
Right. And so we've been kind of following stuff. We see the Dave Champion stuff. We see the Freedom Law School. We see, actually, I sent $30 into Joe Bannister's organization so he'd send me a book, and that was on the 21st of April. We still haven't gotten a book. We're hoping that can be remedied somehow. Joe, I sent you my email in the chat here, so maybe we can get that fixed. But we felt like Joe's a good guy to learn from. I wanted to read the book. And then some of the other ones. But my wife is retired, so neither one of us are W-2s anymore. She's got a pension. I make money on my investments through Schwab, and I'm sure they send a 1099 to the IRS and all that too. So yeah, we just need guidance on how to go about taking care of all these different aspects. And we have like $1 million to convert to Roth. And maybe if there's no taxes that we have to pay, maybe we shouldn't even convert it to Roth. We're just trying to get some of these questions answered by the right people that we can trust to guide us forward. And, we don't have doubts that in the future we might get some letters from the IRS and kind of know how to handle those kind of things once they happen.
Well, I have a few comments, and we probably need to kind of wrap things up. But as far as the book goes, I don't know if the audience or you, Steve, saw, but I was on a bunch of different interviews this, February, March, and April. And so the book donations have gone through the roof. And meanwhile, the person that was helping me to fulfill all those orders, those donations, was in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm trying to get the books out as rapidly as I can. So I really am sorry. If you already gave the $30, so I guess you have to wait for me. But Amazon, which I don't really like supporting, but I mean, they can get the books out lickety split, but then they're Amazon. So
yeah, well, just so you know, Joe, I actually ordered one from Amazon just to be sure I got one, because I really do want to read it. And I figured, well, if the other one eventually shows up, and I assumed it would, I assumed there was some reason why it wasn't showing up, then we can just gift that to somebody who we feel might be able to use the information too, and they can spread it along. So
thank you. Well, yeah, and so anyway, I'm grateful for your patience, and you're probably not alone in terms of how many people are waiting, but we're getting the stuff, the envelopes, trying to get things out the door. So I really appreciate your patience. As far as this information, even though I was already a CPA and an IRS criminal investigator, it still took me 2 years of just slogging through it and talking to people and researching and reading and poking, to even come to the conclusion of okay, well, the IRS is lying to the public, so now I got to, speak up about it. So, certainly feel your pain in terms of there's so many different people that talk, they have their different positions. And, all I can suggest is take it one step at a time. Certainly pray for inspiration, in terms of what you in your particular circumstances should do. For me, because I was actually a link in the chain to putting people in prison over this, it was kind of a big deal for me. And then when I learned, the average American, including myself, the average Joe, wasn't required to file a federal tax return, well, then I stopped. 1998 was the last year, because from then on, my belief, which was based on facts, was that I wasn't required to file Form 1040, and therefore it would be, bearing false witness to my family, to the public, to everyone, if I continued doing something that I wasn't required to do. But, not everybody, very few are an IRS criminal investigator, very few people are even accountants or lawyers. So what we try to do here is just provide resources But, we can't micromanage or we wish we could, step each person along. But all we can do is provide resources. I don't know if you're part of Mark's No Mas Tax Telegram group, but that's
we haven't even heard of any of this stuff until this meeting. So,
right.
So yeah, we need to figure out how to get involved in all of these different methods to get answers. And we know that we're going to run into things, but we have, I guess, kind of assumed that over the past 25, almost 30 years, that a lot of these things have been run into and faced before by different people, and maybe there will be answers. Maybe we won't have to go through exactly the same thing if we can follow the lead of people that have gone through it already. And I guess that's
Right.
our point.
That's true. And I mean, people like Claire, who's been fighting this battle for decades. There's a lot of great, people that participate in this. But, it involves having to take time out of your day to, listen, to tune in. So, that's kind of the best we can do. But I just want to, point out that even for myself with a background in tax, it took me a couple of years before I was really like, okay, this is a problem and I need to, change the way I live my life. But we realize that, each and every person has a different circumstances that they're dealing with. And we just try to, put as much out there as we can. So if I can, I'm going to go ahead and do the typical wrap up. Am I still sharing? Looks like I am. So for Larry's website, you go to the search engine, type in Beecraft Briefs, and that'll take you to the Dixieland Law Journal, Larry's website. In particular, he's got the taxation section here, but he has all kinds of other sections that are very, very important. My website is agentfortruth.com. I just posted a new blog article. So those that have tuned in the past, I've always tried to point people's focus towards this 1040A scam blog that I did, where the IRS literally has to deceive their own computer systems to get assessments against people that don't file a 1040. So the IRS has to lie to their computer system to get an income tax assessment. Goes to show you, that's why when we say that the IRS doesn't have the authority to collect the federal income tax from the vast majority of Americans, this is why. They have to lie to their own computer systems to carry it out. But I just did a new blog article. This is a gentleman named Ebenezer Howe, and he's been litigating this for years and pointing out exactly how these deceitful, fraudulent codes are entered in. So this happens to most everyone that has, high W-2 or high 1099s, where the IRS tries to make an income tax assessment when they don't have a sworn income tax from you, swearing that you owe the tax money. And that puts the IRS in a problem because then they have to lie to their computer system to kick the can down the road. So I'd encourage you to read that. That's at agentfortruth.com. Go to blog articles.
We saw your interview with Laura Logan where you were talking about the 1040A and how you ran into that in the past. So
yes, because they did it to me. They did it to me personally.
Yeah.
My Twitter account is at Joseph Bannister. A lot of those interviews that I did are here, so you can check those out as well. And with that, I'll just see if Mark has any last comments.
No last comments. I think we had a great show. I think people were pretty happy, and maybe we'll do it a couple weeks again.
Great, Larry.
Hello, Tim.
Well, I think we ought to have one next week.
We'll certainly try.
appreciate all
I
your
don't know
help.
if I'm unmuting.
All right. Thank you. Anyway, thank you, everyone.
Good night.
God bless you.